Good evening, everybody. Welcome, friends. So glad you could join us this evening for Hidden in Plain Sight, the World Jewish Relief Archives and the Untold Stories of Survival. My name is David Weisberg, and I have the absolute honor and privilege of serving as the Executive Director of World Jewish Relief USA, the recently established U.S. arm of World Jewish Relief. It is not accidental that we scheduled this program this week, in as much as so many of us have been at various programs and events, recognizing that this is the week that we commemorate Yom HaShoah, a time that we remember the 6 million Jews and others whose lives were taken in the countless communities that were also destroyed. But it's also important to remember that when the Knesset established that day, it established it with the full name Yom HaShoah v'Hagavura, the day of Holocaust and heroism, not only a day to remember those that we lost, but also a moment to recognize the acts of courage and responsibility that took place in the face of that unfolding darkness. Among those were the early efforts of what would become World Jewish Relief, then known as the Central British Fund, which responded in real time to a crisis whose full scope was not yet known. In remembering both what was lost and what was saved, we're invited to consider not only the past, but the responsibility that we carry in this moment. And indeed, that responsibility to lift up those in crisis, both Jews and non-Jews, with an equal sense of urgency, is at the center of the work that World Jewish Relief does today. We have a tremendous group of attendees joining us from around the country and around the world. We had nearly 250 people register for this program tonight, and that doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens because we have wonderful partners who have worked with us to co-promote this program, and I want to acknowledge them before we start. Our 22 partners: the Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Ramapo College of New Jersey, the Dallas Jewish Historical Society, the Defiant Requiem Foundation, Generations of the Shoah International, Holocaust and Genocide Education Network, the Holocaust Documentation and Education Center, the Holocaust Museum of Orange County, the Institute for Holocaust and Genocide Studies, the Jewish Genealogical Society of Colorado, the Jewish Genealogical Society of Greater Miami, the Jewish Genealogical Society of Greater Washington, the Jewish Genealogical Society of New York, the Jewish Genealogical Society of Oregon, the Jewish Genealogy Society of Southern Nevada, the Kindertransport Association, the New Krakow Friendship Society, the Ray Walpole Institute for the Study of Holocaust, Genocide, and Crimes Against Humanity at Western Washington University, San Francisco Bay Area Jewish Genealogical Society, 6 Million Voices, the South Carolina Council on the Holocaust, the Vermont Holocaust Memorial, and the Zeckelman Holocaust Center. Thank you so much for your partnership. And so tonight, we turn our attention to what has in many ways been hidden in plain sight. Not only the history we know, but the stories still waiting to be discovered. Not only the record of what was lost, but the record of what was preserved and what may still be found. And we have a really outstanding panel to share that with you tonight. I'm going to introduce them one by one, and as I do that, bring each of them onto the screen, starting with my partner in doing this work, the Chief Executive of World Jewish Relief, Paul Anticoni. I want to acknowledge, by the way, that while there are people attending throughout the country, there are also folks throughout the world, and while it's 7 p.m. my time, it is midnight already in London, where Paul is now. So, Paul, thank you
Thank you, David.
for the extra task of staying up late on our behalf. Paul, as I said, is Chief Executive of World Jewish Relief, an organization with origins that trace back to 1933, when it was created in response to the growing crisis facing Jews in Europe. Under Paul's leadership, That mission continues today, supporting vulnerable communities around the world, while also serving as a steward of a remarkable archive that we'll discuss tonight that captures those earliest moments of response, decision, and rescue. Our second panelist, Mona Golabek. Mona Golabek is an internationally acclaimed concert pianist, as well as the author and performer of The Pianist of Willesden Lane, which brings to life her mother's experience as a child on the Kindertransport. Through her work, Mona has helped to ensure that these stories are not only remembered, but felt and carried forward across generations through music, memory, and performance. Welcome, Mona. It's so good to have you here.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Our next panelist, my friend, Arthur Kurzweil. Arthur is an author, magician, and one of the most respected Jewish genealogists in the world. For decades, he has helped individuals uncover hidden chapters of their own family histories, often beginning with the smallest fragment and piece by piece revealing entire worlds that had long been hidden from view. And I want to note that Arthur is responsible for teaching me the Jewish origins of the word abracadabra. He really is a magic person, Arthur Kurzweil. And our final wonderful panelist is Deborah Oppenheimer. Deborah is an Academy Award-winning filmmaker, best known for Into the Arms of Strangers, Stories of the Kindertransport. Her work has brought global attention to one of the most extraordinary rescue efforts of the Holocaust, illuminating not only the history itself, but the deeply personal stories within it, stories that in many cases might otherwise have remained untold. I want to encourage those of you who are watching, if you have questions, to please ask them using the Q&A feature. We will entertain questions near to the end of the program, but please feel free to ask them as they come into your mind. And so we have with us tonight people who uncover stories, people who tell them, people who carry them, and people who help to ensure that they're not lost. But Paul, before we go any further, I want to take a step back for a moment. And for those joining us without deep familiarity, what is World Jewish Relief? What are the World Jewish Relief Archives, and how are they connected?
Thank you, David, and good evening to everyone. In a nutshell, the Central British Fund for German Jewry, as it was first founded in 1933, was established to raise resources to explicitly help Jewish communities flee from Nazi Europe. And between 1933 and 1946, funds enabled almost 65,000 adults, approximately 9,000 children as part of the Kindertransports, and a further 732 Jewish orphan children post-war to come to the UK, either find sanctuary and homes in the UK, or assistance onwards to Palestine, to the States, to Canada, and to other parts of the world. Today, in a very different context, but with the world in as difficult a state as it is, World Jewish Relief's mission today is to provide, to save, support, empower marginalized communities across the world, particularly facing the consequences of disaster, conflict, and crisis, to both survive and thrive. And we're proud to work both within and beyond the Jewish community. Much of our work at the moment is in Eastern Europe, particularly in Ukraine, where we probably would consider the most vulnerable Jewish community to exist, but also extensive work in Israel, Ethiopia, Uganda, absolutely worldwide. Last year, we worked in 19 countries of the world, assisting upwards of 176,000 people. As I said, between 1933 and 1946, the Central British Fund for German Jewry, it then changed its name at the outbreak of war to become the Central British Fund for World Jewish Relief, recognizing that German Jewry would not be a good fundraising title at the outbreak of war. The organization kept detailed records of those that it assisted. For anybody that registered for assistance, a registration slip was documented. Anybody that sought assistance had a registration slip, a simple slip that captures name, address, place of birth, when you arrived in the UK, where you're living in the UK. And we currently hold 277,000 of those registration slips. For any individual who then received assistance from the Central British Fund, a case file was opened. And the case file, in sort of capsule form, documents, again, where you arrived, how you arrived, who you arrived with, what your, all the sort of basic demographic data, but then also what condition you're in, what assistance you required, where you might have been fostered, what educational, medical, employment support you might require, right up until the individual might have received either their naturalization documentation or assistance to move onwards to a third country. And we have 35,000 of those case files. And those case files, can be anything between 1 and 200 pages thick. And they really are unique personal records that detail the story predominantly of individuals' integration, or the challenges of integration once they arrived in the UK. I mean, they really are a unique, invaluable insight into that particular period and the role that the Central British Fund and British society played, and they are a treasure trove for family genealogical investigation.
So I want to move to Arthur, who's an expert Jewish genealogist, and ask Arthur, is this something that's really been hiding in plain sight, and what kind of doors do you think this has the potential to open up for folks who didn't even know these archives existed?
Well, there's no question that it's a treasure trove, as Paul indicated. I don't know how many people have yet had access to it, but as word gets out, it's going to be used by lots and lots of people. We genealogists discover very quickly that even one little tidbit of information can open up a whole world. When people don't, hidden in plain sight is a magician's term, so I like it very much. In 1979, I wrote an article for New York Magazine, and it included information about the YIVO Institute for Jewish Research. And I was describing the genealogical treasures that are there. Well, the next time I went to YIVO, boy, were they angry at me. They were angry at me because I let the cat out of the bag. I let the world know the treasures that they have. Up until that point, it was a quiet place where PhD students would do some research, and suddenly everybody was coming to YIVO looking for records and documents that they themselves didn't know they had, and didn't know what kind of value they would have for people. In my own research, my first cousin once removed told me one sentence. That one sentence got me back to the 1500s. I went to the archives in the New York Public Library. I went to the Warsaw phone book of 1936, and I found a cousin of mine who survived the Holocaust. And that opened up another whole story. When people ask me how many people in my family were killed during the Holocaust, I always say 6 million, because as Rabbi Steinsaltz points out, we're not a religion, we're not a race, we're not a country. What we are is we're a family, and those of us who are doing Jewish genealogical research are trying to connect with that family. And this new discovery, I guess I could call it, is going to be a goldmine for researchers.
And Arthur, nobody is going to be angry at you about letting more people know about this one. That I can promise you. I want to move to Deborah. As someone who's produced an Academy Award-winning documentary on the Kindertransport, a piece of history so connected to these archives, how and when did you become aware of their existence, and how has it informed your work?
My mother had passed away at the end of 1993, and she had never talked about her experience. She was put on the Kindertransport just after her 11th birthday, and her parents were killed. And she never spoke. We didn't know anything. And I didn't know the questions to ask. And when I tried in my clumsy way, she would cry, I would cry, and then I retreated so as not to hurt her or harm her. And when she passed away, there was some kind of permission in there to now go in search of her story. And I wanted to find out what the Kindertransport was, what happened to my mother, and what happened to my grandparents. And it was still early on in the Kindertransport literature. Bertha Leverton, the founder of the reunion movement, had published her book, I Came Alone, with 400 accounts, and Laurie Siegel had written her book. But the amount of information we found filled this much of a single page paper, and we felt a little bit lost. And then I found a man who was the head of the Kindertransport Association of Southern California, where I live. And I went over to his house, and on a table, he had spread out quite a bit of information for me, including the name and telephone number of a woman named Amy Gottlieb. And Amy Gottlieb was a historian and professor. And maybe, Paul, you can chime in if I say anything that's incorrect about Amy. But I was told an incorrect story at the time, which was that she was walking down the street and found a trash bin and files thrown in it and thought, oh, what are these? And it turns out that they were Kindertransport files. It wasn't quite that. She was brought in to go through file cabinets with unknown contents and unviewed contents. And when she started going through it, she discovered thousands of Kindertransport and other files. And that, talk about exploding archives with Evo and you guys. And it led, I reached out to her, I called her, or I emailed her. No, I didn't email her. It was too early for that. So I'm not sure how I reached out to her, but there was a slight error in the time difference between London and Los Angeles. And she called me at 5 a.m. to tell me that she had found my mother's file. And she wound up faxing them to me. These are some of the pages that she sent me. On one of my mother's files, it says dossier destroyed. But I think for anybody listening to this program, when you don't have that information, every little morsel, every little word is priceless and helps to put together the pieces of the puzzle. So for me, meeting Amy and being introduced to World Jewish Relief in 1998 was just a door opening.
Excellent. Thank you. And Mona, the archives have played a very pivotal role in your life. So as someone who discovered missing pieces of your own family history through the archives, how did that happen? Did you contact the World Jewish Relief Archives? Did someone reach out to you?
So first, before I tell my story, I need to tell Deborah, I'm so moved by what you shared just now, because it was the opposite for me. My mother told me everything. And my story is that when I was a little girl, she taught me the piano. She always said that each piece of music tells a story. So I heard about this rescue operation. I heard about the choice that the family had to make, because in Vienna, they only had one ticket and there were 3 daughters. I heard about what happened when she arrived in London and how she ultimately made her way to Willesden Lane and ended up in a hostel there. And she kept telling me what my grandmother her mother had said to her at the train station: hold on to the music, because she was a child prodigy, and the music, I will be with you every step of the way through that music. So she teaches me the piano. I'm enchanted by the stories. I grow up. I'm engaged to play the very piece she dreamed of making her debut in, the Grieg Piano Concerto. And I wake up with a dream in my heart. I want to tell her story. Now, I only knew it from her, from what I had heard. So I never gave up, and I got this book published, as you mentioned before, the Children of Willesden Lane. And then somehow I kept going, and we created a play, and the play became successful, and I was brought to London. And before I got to London, I get a phone call from a lady named Linda Rosenblatt, who changed the course of my life a little bit. And she said, I've heard about your play. I know you're coming, and we would like to meet you. But she didn't tell me why. She just told me she was World Jewish Relief. And then I would go around in London and even in the subway, and I would see this poster. Did we save your family? Well, we saved the pianist of Willesden Lane, Lisa Yura. And then what was extraordinary for me was that she came to the show, I met her, and then she invited me to the archives. And I came to the archives, and I had one of the most extraordinary moments of my life. She showed me these documents that you, Paul, and David are talking about. It was one of the most emotional, extraordinary experiences of my life, because I had only heard about the stuff through my mother, but now I was seeing it in writing. Everything she had talked about. And we were able to film that as part of a documentary that we were working on. But I'll speak about that a little bit more.
Well, Mona, I want to jump right into that now. Can you just talk a little bit about what you learned and how it felt?
Well, I started to look at these with Linda, with white gloves on, at these documents that I was not aware of. I could see the street that she told me about growing up in Vienna. I could see Willesden Lane and all the kids that she was there in the hostel with. I could see how she went for the scholarship to the London Royal Academy and how she worked on the machines. And then it's very hard for me to talk about this, but my mother would always talk about the lists that she ran to look for after the war. I'm sure, Deborah, you discovered that as well in the paperwork, because that was the desperation to see if the family was still alive. And my mother would put me to sleep at night and talk about these lists. But then I saw it in the writing, in the documents. Girl is seeking the lists. Where can she go see the lists to see if her parents are there? And I just broke down crying. And everything she had told me, I saw it was true. But the wealth of the world that was opened up for me, it wasn't just my mother, but there it was real.
So, Deborah, I want to ask you, in the course of your work on the Kindertransport, was there a moment when there's something that you encountered in the historical record that shifted how you understood the story?
Yeah, I think the challenge for those of us who are looking is we don't really know how to read these documents or what we're looking for. And so you can read them one time, 5 times, 10 times, and miss information that's in there. And then finally you have this eureka moment and it all lines up. So I have more show and tell. These are the documents that World Jewish Relief sent me on my mother's brother. And, the Holocaust is the great diaspora and sent everybody all over the world. And so my mother came to New York and her brother stayed in London, and she never saw him again before he died. And I never met him. So there are at least a dozen pages here, probably more. And in the court, and my uncle was not very present and available for my mother. So he was, these pages explained it. He was interned as an enemy alien. He joined the Pioneer Corps. He was going back and forth to these meetings like Mona's mother, all of which are documented, all of which have a timestamp and an explanation of what the conversations were. And so suddenly you have compassion for this man and you understand why he couldn't have been more available to his little sister. And so that was a big discovery for me and a big shift.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Arthur, tell me about a moment that you've encountered where a discovery didn't just fill a gap, but it really changed how someone understood their family's story, whether that's your story and the story of the phone book or somebody else's story. How does a little piece make a massive difference?
Well, when I was growing up, I thought the Holocaust didn't touch my family. All 4 of my grandparents came to America. Nobody ever spoke about anybody who was touched by the Holocaust. And there's a myth that's gone around for a long time that the Nazis destroyed all the records. Well, Nazis didn't destroy records. Nazis kept records. And one of the organizations that I discovered was the International Tracing Service, which has gathered millions of Nazi documents, alphabetically indexed. And I discovered 200 people in my father's family alone who were murdered during the Holocaust. So that certainly opened up my eyes.
And Paul, I want to ask you, because you are both the steward of this incredible resource, but with that comes an incredible amount of responsibility. And so tell me about that responsibility for caring for these records, protecting these records, and deciding how and when they're brought into view.
I mean, for us, the starting point is that our day job is, of course, saving and changing lives today. And I recognize, and I met with Amy Gottlieb, who sort of consolidated the archive when I started at World Jewish Relief in 2006. But I just saw the archives as a distraction. World Jewish Relief wasn't a museum. It wasn't itself an archive. And it was Professor David Cesarani who introduced me to the treasure trove that it is. And I sort of now recognize, on the one hand, these 277,000 registration slips and 35,000 case files, a certain responsibility and obligation to want to return them to the families that they reference, that they link to, and obviously use that as an opportunity to introduce people to the challenge of saving lives today. But I'm very conscious that many of those case files still contain some very difficult, challenging personal information. We had an example very, very recently of a gentleman who wanted to see if we had his mother's case file. We had to ask if his mother was still alive, and she was, and we had to ask his mother if she'd give permission to share the file with her son, and she said no. And the simple reason that the case file documented a child that this young girl had early on her arrival into the UK, out of wedlock. The child was given up for adoption, and she didn't want her son of a later marriage to know about this traumatic period in her life, and in a very sensitive time. And so many of the files, of course, still now sadly relate to people that are no longer with us, but they still contain some very sensitive information. So I think we've been cautious about opening them up to the public for data reasons. But we really now want to reunite every one of those files with the families that they do relate to. And we need to make use of the historic uniqueness of them to enable academics and community specialists to learn, the untold stories that they tell.
Thank you. And so, Mona, when something new emerged from the archives about your own family, did it change how you understood your mother's story and your own story? And I'm also interested, on the subject of the personal versus the public. Like, what drove you to be so public with your story, and why is that important to you?
Oh, wow. Why have I been so obsessed to travel the world and tell her story? I think it was from those stories when I was a little kid that she was so generous, that she so inspired me. But there was a dark side. I mean, the music lessons were spectacular, but putting me to sleep at night was painful because she would say certain things to me of the dark side, wanting me never to forget when she talked about the lists. And she revealed something that I really don't want to maybe speak about right now because I probably will break down crying. But we captured that in a moment in this new documentary that's coming out now. And I often say that I have 6 million numbers etched on my heart because of what my parents shared with me. And I think it's because I know that I'm so proud to be the daughter of these two beautiful parents. I'm so proud to be Jewish. I'm so proud to be the daughter of refugees. And I think that World Jewish Relief speaks to that. The Jewishness in all of us, how proud we are to walk in this world. And I have to say, even in my recent going to China and doing a tour where the book came out in Chinese, simplified Chinese, it was such a privilege to share this story with the Chinese people. And no matter what you feel traveling in the world, if people don't agree with you in your government or whatnot, and tragedies are happening, a story like this, or a story of what Deborah has done to let the world know through her extraordinary film, these are universal issues. The universality of the greatest refugee crisis is upon us now in the world. And what World Jewish Relief is doing is just unbelievable and spectacular. So when we talk about our purpose and the weight on our shoulder to understand the responsibility, each one of us has to go out there and make the clarion call and look at what World Jewish Relief did. You asked me, was there a moment when I looked at this document, and I also did, Deborah got the documents of my mother and my aunts, and I saw the word deported for the first time of my grandparents. It came alive for me. I'd heard it before, but to see it written and to see how my mother had all these jobs as a millinery and in the factories and making the uniforms for the military and whatnot. I wondered sometimes, was she just saying that because she wanted me to be grateful that I didn't have to have a job like that, that I had the opportunity to grow up in America and whatnot. And there it was, right in black and white on those pages, the truth coming out. And it just was incredulous.
So as we mark this week of Yom HaShoah, I want to stick with this idea of what is still waiting to be found and what's at stake if these stories remain undiscovered. And so, Arthur, I want to look to you as someone who, makes magic in so many different ways, including helping people uncover their own histories. Do you ever worry that there are stories that just simply may never be found? And what does that mean? And I'm going to ask you as a follow-up, how do you direct someone who's starting the process of looking at their history? But let's start out with that first question about worrying that stories may never be found, and what's the implication of that?
Well, of course, there are countless stories that will never be found. Countless people who don't whose names we don't even find on records, but we know that they perished. So that's a hole that will never be filled. But the good news is that the Jewish genealogy world is pretty organized these days and helps lots and lots of people. You listed the names of some of the Jewish genealogical societies that are co-sponsoring tonight. There are about 80 Jewish genealogical societies around the world. Each of them are populated by members who are obsessed with the subject and eager to help other people. There's also an umbrella organization that holds an annual conference. A couple of thousand people come to it. And there's also a website called Jewish Gen, JewishGen.org, which is in a sense cyberspace headquarters for Jewish genealogy. And anybody who has never done any genealogical research who goes to JewishGen.org, I promise you that we won't see you for months because they have such a tremendous amount of material. And as Mona and Deborah both indicated, just one word makes a difference.
And Arthur, as we get further removed from the Holocaust, and there are less folks who, there are less survivors around, there are less folks who have those connections. Do you see the way that people engage with these stories changing? And how can discovering a personal connection through the archives reshape that?
Well, what comes to mind is there was a historian, an immigration historian whose last name was Hansen. And in the history field, there's something called Hansen's Law. And Hanson's law says what the children of immigrants want to forget, the grandchildren of immigrants want to remember. It's not always the case, but it's often the case. So I hope that Jewish families, because of Yom HaShoah and Jewish education, will know about the Holocaust and will then discover that the records in so many cases exist, and you can find details that you never imagined were possible.
That's great. And Deborah, you've helped bring these stories to light for a global audience through your film. So when a story is uncovered decades later, what does it change for the individual and for how we understand that history? And I'm wondering if perhaps you've gotten feedback from a surprising source as well.
Okay, two different questions. I think as we learn these things, we find out more about our loved ones, because I don't think my case was very different from Mona's, but so you don't get to know the story that you wish you knew and that you could talk about. And so through this, you get to know your loved one, and then you get to know yourself. And if there are children involved, that extends to the next generation as well. I mean, this is intergenerational trauma and just generational formation. And so finding out that information, I think, gives you a connection to your past and to your present and to the future. As far as what more can be found, Amy Gottlieb was finding things out back in the 90s. You mentioned David Cesarani, Paul. He wrote the introduction, the historical introduction to our companion book. And so I'm sure he pulled some of the information that he put into that in-depth writing that he put it into it. But now in 2025 and 26, we have Amy Williams out there, who is the new Amy Gottlieb, and exponentially. And she's in Poland and the Netherlands and Germany and Israel and Washington, D.C. She's all over the world. And now with the AJR, finding the lists that nobody had ever seen before. The Kindertransport manifests for the trains and for the boats. And again, you're finding these little morsels. I mean, who knew you could get excited about the amount of cargo that's on the boat going to Harwich? And so Amy is upending ideas that we've held for a very long time about the Kindertransport, that there were 10,000 children. There weren't 10,000 children. There were a little over 9,300. Why it came to an end? Because of the outbreak of war? No, that wasn't the reason it came to an end. And so Amy, every time I've heard her talk, is sending people to World Jewish Relief to find their history. So I would imagine you're deluged with people who are looking to find additional information. And so I know from the research I'm doing, the projects I'm working on, I just received 200 documents this past weekend that I never had seen before, that I never knew existed, not from World Jewish Relief, but taken all together, it provides a story that for, I think, everybody on this panel is thrilling and really exciting, and that we devour. And yes, Arthur, that you go down those rabbit holes and you stay there for a very long time with great enthusiasm and passion.
So Mona, I want to ask you, World Jewish Relief offers you a new role, and that role is to prepare everybody who is going into that meeting like you went into, where you're going to discover something, that connection to your family history. How do you prepare somebody for this and the life-changing effect that it can have on them?
I had no clue what I was walking into. First of all, I was so nervous doing my show, I could barely concentrate every day doing that. And then Linda invited me, and I walked in, and I was stunned, completely stunned. She just told me, I'm going to show you some archives and something about your mother. And I can only say that if anyone out there, if you have a thought, or you know that your parents or your grandparents were somehow involved or rescued, I mean, get on a run as fast as you can. This is a life-changing opportunity to experience and to enrich. I can't even imagine, Deborah, what it must have been like for you, because as I said, we're the reverse. And so it unfolded like a rose. That's maybe the wrong analogy, but that must have been astonishing for you, seeking, like, where do I find the pieces? What do I do? Well, I knew all the stories in many ways, but then there it was, all in the writing, and things that I didn't even know. Like my mother would always tell me she was sick during the war years because of the dampness of London and whatnot. And I thought, maybe was she exaggerating? I didn't know. You know, you're a little kid, you wonder. And then I read it. The girl has bronchitis. The girl has been taken to the doctor. I mean, the documents were so detailed. It was stunning to see, and how her sister came, and how she was trying to get letters, and every little detail that put that brought it alive, brought it so deeply alive. So in answer to your question, David, I'm not sure I did. I don't know how you prepare for something as stunning as what World Jewish Relief offers to all of us.
Right. Paul, before I ask you a different question, I want to ask you to comment for a moment on just the heroic group of volunteers who do this work in the archives and take the requests and do the research. And they're some of the unsung heroes of this story, and they deserve recognition.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, for 93 years, the organization has depended on teams of volunteers. Even in the 1930s, it was volunteers that were providing this amazing logistical operation, moving, money and materials and making introductions to support kids and adults. And today I rely on a small team of 7 volunteers who handle, as you say, the deluge of inquiries coming in, often with inevitably broken information because they don't exactly know how the surname was spelt, or they think their father's date of birth was 1898, but it actually might have been 1899. They're not exactly sure. And the difference can be significant because we might have 20 people with the same name all coming from Vienna, and trying to distinguish between the two is important. But the team is fantastic. Their only angst is that they want 10 times the number of inquiries. And I think our determination to reunite these files with the families that they belong to, there's no charge at all whatsoever. There's no obligation. The obligation is on our behalf to reunite those files is what drives them on, and we're lucky.
And we will share at the end of this webinar precisely how somebody puts in that request for research into their own family records. And so Paul, these records capture decisions made in real time without knowing how the story would end back in 1933. And I want to connect that to the work that you are leading World Jewish Relief in doing today, and wondering about whether you ever feel the same sense of uncertainty and responsibility about the work that we are doing now relative to the work that was done 93 years ago.
Well, the obvious answer to that is, I mean, I look back, I look back on the work that this amazing organization did in the 30s and 40s. And while acknowledging the 65,000 adults and 9,000 kids and 732 orphan children that were rescued, the reality is we didn't do enough. We didn't do nearly enough, and we could have done more. And that thought drives the organization today with a relentless energy. I do not want us to be looking back in years to come and thinking I'm thinking we should have done more. We could have done more. And I feel the necessity that when you get the moment to save life and change life, take it. And it pushes the organization, and you have to take risks, grave risks, in the places that we're working. But it's so important because I don't want to ever think we should have done more.
Thank you. So I want to encourage folks to put questions into the Q&A feature. We do have some questions that are in there already. Arthur, some of them are just fans of yours expressing their admiration for you. I want to acknowledge that I'm part of that club. But this is a question that, Arthur, you may have the best answer to if there's an answer. Someone's asking, are there records for those murdered in Lithuania during the Holocaust? Were those mass killings documented?
Unfortunately, when people were shot on the street, nobody kept records of these things. But the International Tracing Service, again, is the place to go to find out if there were any records. That you never know what you're going to find until you ask. In fact, I'm going to ask how to get in touch with Amy Gottlieb, because the branch of the family that my family goes back to the 1500s is the Gottlieb family. And I don't know Amy, but I like to. And that's a lead that I'm going to follow up on.
Unfortunately, she's passed away.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks for telling me.
I've got contact with a nephew of hers, though.
Arthur, the International Tracing Service that you referenced, how would somebody find that?
They're in Arlesund, Germany. And all you have to do is write them, and they will write you back. The more information you give them, the more information they have to work with. They have a more complex address, but if you just put International Tracing Service, Arlesund, Germany, your letter will get there.
Excellent. Thank you. So another question, and Paul, I think we know the answer to this one, but is there a database that one can search, or do you have to write to World Jewish Relief? What's the process? And we'll share this as well at the end, but just talk a little bit about the process, how long it typically takes, how easy it is.
Yeah, it's very easy. I mean, go to the website, worldjewishRelief.org, look at what we do, and there's an archive section. You've got to complete a simple form, who you are and who you're looking for, and as much information as you can about the person you're looking for, particularly name that they might have had in leaving place of origin or arriving in the United Kingdom, and hopefully their date of birth and any other associated family members. And my archive team download those files every single day. The actual search capability is pretty quick, but they might come up with a dozen names of people with the same name, and they need to have further communication with the inquirer. But we like to turn that around as quickly as we can. Inevitably, as Arthur highlights, it leads to other questions because the files are, semi-incomplete, and they might say, so-and-so left Southampton for New York in 1947 on the SS something or other. And that's the file ends, and you only get part of the story, so you've got to pick it up somewhere else. And of course, the archive team can help signpost inquirers to other archival collections to help continue with that story. But it's a very, very simple process, which we want to obviously encourage as rapid a turnaround of those inquiries as we can.
Yes, I'm seeing a number of questions as to whether this is being recorded. The answer is yes. We do want to share it so that more folks understand and have the opportunity. There's something in the Q&A. It's not quite a question, but Mona, I want to share it with you. It's from Robin. I thank you for all your work. My mother was on the Kindertransport from Frankfurt to London in April 1939. She also lived in a hostel on Willesden Road. I always wondered why she lived in a hostel and not in a private home, and why she didn't live with her cousins in England. My father was one of the 732 survivors brought to England in 1946. He was a Windermere child.
Wow, amazing.
So you have no insight onto why she lived in a hostel and not in a private home.
Why my mother lived? I
know why this woman's.
oh no,
Yeah.
I wouldn't. No.
I
It
think,
may,
the-
you know,
I think
everybody.
David, I think the Windermere, I mean, they were called the boys, but of course it was boys and girls. Um, Many would have, I mean, some came to Windermere up in the northwest of England, others came through Southampton. And early in their arrival, obviously, these individuals had suffered, I mean, these were the true survivors. They had suffered absolutely unbelievable horrors. And as kids, I mean, the story is that the British government gave the Central British Fund, World Jewish League, permission to find 1,000 children under 16, but we couldn't find 1,000. We could only find 732. And not all of them actually were under 16. They fabricated their age to get on that plane from Prague to the UK. But they were in such a state that initially it was more helpful to accommodate them in a sort of a dormitory, in a hostel, in the UK, in London, in Lingfield House, or up in the Lake District, a bit to provide mental health, physical, medical support to them collectively. But can I just, that individual who just raised that question, I mean, the 732 files are fantastic files. If we haven't reunited you with your father's file, please let us do that. That's a really easy, simple one. We would love to send you that file. It's tough reading. It's really, really tough, brutal reading, but it's a story you've got to read.
So,
And there's also a documentary and a movie about Windermere, and also there's somebody with the World Jewish Relief whose father was a Windermere child as well.
Cool.
As far as why she may have gone into a hostel, if she went to Windermere and not with her cousins, is you had to have a sponsor in Britain, and her cousins his or her cousins may have not been equipped to care for her and get her to school, feed her, house her, do what was needed, take on the responsibility of a child. So they may have helped to get her to England, but then the child might have gone into a hostel because that was the sponsorship. Was Windermere a B'nai B'rith hostel? Do you know, Mona?
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't.
Okay.
So I want to direct this question to Arthur. I think we asked something like this, but I can shed a little bit of light on this as well. The question is, were there any records available of the mass shootings in the area of what we now know as the shtetls of Eastern Europe?
Well, as I said before, if people were rounded up and shot on the street, which happened all too often, there are no records really.
So I do believe in my family's case, my family came from a village called Obadivka in Ukraine, and my great-great-grandfather and one of his sons were killed in the Obadivka pogrom of 1919 and buried in a mass grave there that I've had the opportunity to visit. That there is some kind of book, there is some kind of record of everyone who passed away there. I can't speak with great detail on it, but I know that we were able to identify something in my family's case. And so I just want to encourage folks that it is always worth looking.
And I should say that there are several hundred books called memorial books or Yisker books that were put out by survivors of towns. And often in these books, you'll find lists of people that were gathered just from people's memories of who their neighbors were and who their relative ones were who were murdered or who perished. So the
and
memorial.
Arthur, I think that's precisely what we're referring to in my case. So thank you for shedding some light on that. Final question to Paul. Is there a limit on the number of forms you can submit at one time? I have multiple family members who went from Germany to England. Can I submit all of these requests all at once?
You can submit all those names on one form to make it as easy as possible, but there is no limit. The more names, the better.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I want to say thank you to our panelists. I want to, because I do want to provide that information for folks who are interested in accessing, putting in a submission to find your own records. Here is how you inquire about your own family history. You can visit our website at usa.worldjewishRelief.org/archives-your-family-history. We have a QR code you can scan here as well. Do not worry if you don't get this information down quickly. For anyone who has attended or registered for this webinar, we will send that to you. You can find it on our worldjewishrelief.org website as well. And as Paul said, we certainly want to get as many requests as possible. I want to thank once again all of our partners around the country who played such a key role in connecting so many folks to this webinar tonight. That's the Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Ramapo College of New Jersey, the Dallas Jewish Historical Society, the Defiant Requiem Foundation, Generations of the Shoah International, Holocaust and Genocide Education Network, Holocaust Documentation and Education Center, Holocaust Museum of Orange County, Institute for Holocaust and Genocide Studies, Jewish Genealogical Society of Colorado, Jewish Genealogical Society of Greater Miami, Jewish Genealogical Society of Greater Washington, Jewish Genealogical Society of New York, Jewish Genealogical Society of Oregon, Jewish Genealogy Society of Southern Nevada, the Kindertransport Association, the New Krakow Friendship Society, the Ray Walpole Institute for the Study of Holocaust, Genocide, and Crimes Against Humanity at Western Washington University, San Francisco Bay Area Jewish Genealogical Society, 6 Million Voices, South Carolina Council on the Holocaust, Vermont Holocaust Memorial, and the Zeckelman Holocaust Center. And I want to once again thank all of our wonderful panelists, Paul Anticoni. Paul, I think it's probably time for you to go to sleep. Mona Golabek, Arthur Kurzweil, Deborah Oppenheimer. This was such a wonderful and enlightening conversation. And most importantly, I hope it leads to moments of enlightenment for all those who are participating in this webinar tonight. Thank you so much for your participation. And I wish all of you great moments of discovery and enlightenment. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you, David. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.